This episode brought to you by Discovery Bank. Ready to experience the future of banking now? Get on board. Discovery Bank Limited is an authorized FSP 48657. T's and C's apply. So, you think you want to be a CEO?
Every breakthrough has been incredibly hard. It's been hard to think through. It's been hard to deal with the consequences, both the consequences that we can see and the law of unintended consequences, which of course at this level is at play every day of our lives.
The power, the status, the money.
I remember him saying, "My boy, you're not a consultant anymore. You're not paid to speak. You're paid to shut up. Now keep quiet and listen."
Is it all it's cracked up to be?
What I'm always completely obsessed with is what people-related decision should I have made differently?
Sir Bradford grew up in Cape Town. A phone call to a man called Jim Wulfensohn, who later became head of the World Bank, changed his life. He worked at McKinsey, ran Investec in London, and was drawn into public service, which culminated in his being appointed chairman of the Court of the Bank of England, the board of the Bank of England. He's been chairman of Goldman Sachs International, and in recent years has been CEO of Kirsh International, running the complex affairs of Africa's richest man and driving the deal to sell Natie Kirsh's Jetro cash and carry in the United States for a princely $29 billion. I'm Bruce Whitfield. So, what does it take to be a CEO?
Well, sometimes I think, Bruce, it takes a gross naivete, a completely gross naivete. And when I think back to some of the experiences that I've encountered along the way, you sometimes think to yourself, well, what exactly am I doing this for? But on a serious note, on a very serious note, it takes curiosity, it takes a great degree of interest in other people and the world around you, and it takes a passion. It really does take a passion, because there's some awfully lonely and difficult days, and some incredibly grinding decisions that have to be taken. And when you take those, sometimes you think to yourself, wow, this is quite a path that I've chosen. And in those moments, you have to have real resolution about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
What was the first CEO job? Was that Investec?
Yes, it was. I was a partner at McKinsey in New York, and I was about 32 years old, and I was asked to go and speak at a conference at Sun City for a bank that I'd never heard of. I dealt with them, but I'd really never heard of how they were doing. And the reason I said yes was I wanted to visit my parents who were living in South Africa. And I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to get away from New York, where I was seeing to my clients, and go and visit a bank in South Africa. And I got to meet Investec, and I realized that these were probably Stephen Kossef and Bernard Cantor, who were running the place, were the most. Upon meeting them, it took about 5 minutes to figure it out, and that's because it was 4 minutes of introductions. They were the most eminently unconsultable people I've ever met in my entire life. These were not people that one could consult to, but they were fantastic entrepreneurs and just amazing characters, and got to know them. After a while, it became clear to me that I wasn't really meant to be a consultant and wanted to be a principal. I told Stephen that I was leaving McKinsey, and he said, "Well, where are you going?" And I told him where I was going, and he said, "No, before you do that, let's come and have a chat. You and Bernard and I should meet." We met, and they hired me to be their CEO in London. And that was, a moment when they took a risk on me. I was a young guy at 32, and I think I genuinely was so grossly naive at that stage, so incredibly naive. I felt that, I could do a bang-up job of this, but I had very little idea, other than theoretically, what it meant to be a chief executive of a bank. I was passionate about banking, but I didn't know what it entailed.
That goes to your contention that you've got to be absolutely curious about people, and you've got to be absolutely curious about the world around you. I'm sure that you had the curiosity of the world around you sorted out. Did you learn the other skill, which was at 32 managing people, most of whom would have been senior to you, at least in age anyway.
I think that's a really wonderful word. Did I learn the other skill? The answer is no, I didn't learn the other skill. I had that skill beaten into me, panel beaten into me, Bruce, particularly by Bernard, actually, who was emotionally an extremely attuned guy. I'll let you in on a secret. I used to hate feedback. I actually couldn't bear feedback. And when I started as a young McKinsey associate after business school, I remember after our very first meeting, literally my first meeting, I was there day one. A partner said to me, "Hey, Brad, I'd like to give you some feedback." I thought, but I don't actually want your feedback. I don't want to hear feedback from you or anybody else ever. I don't like feedback. I don't want it. I find it very upsetting, very unsettling, and I don't want it. Okay. I think the only feedback I'd been given up to that date was during my contract of articles in South Africa, and that wasn't particularly compelling feedback. It wasn't helpful, it wasn't actionable, and it wasn't particularly uplifting, or it didn't build me in any way. So I really, really struggled with feedback, and I took it because he wasn't really offering me, it wasn't really an option. And from then on, I was given feedback, I would say multiple times a day throughout my entire career at McKinsey, such that by the time I got to Investec, I was really attuned to getting feedback and welcomed it. Well, Bernard was a guy who was very delighted to give it and delighted to give it frequently. And I learned a tremendous amount from him about how to think about managing my life, comporting myself. You know, I made a huge number, and this is not some kind of a false modesty story. Believe you me, Bruce, no false modesty here. I made a huge number of errors along the way in terms of managing people at work, thinking about what I should do, shouldn't do. Some of the decisions that I regret the most actually relate to the management of people. You know, in those kind of lonely moments when you are lying awake at night and not sleeping yet again, thinking about would have, could have, should have, what should I have done, what could I have done, what would I have done. I never think about strategy or a missed opportunity. I never, ever think about what should I have done? Should we have bought that business or this business? Should we have sold this or that? Should we have done this portfolio trade or that? That never crosses my mind. What I'm always completely obsessed with is what people-related decision should I have made differently? And that's a work in progress. I'm 60 years old. Okay, it's 28 years since I took that Investec job. And I may just be kidding myself, Bruce. I may be kind of completely kidding myself, but I feel like a babe in the woods when it comes to trying to work out sometimes which way to go. It feels very much a work in progress, and I remain completely open to feedback. I happen to have surrounded myself with characters along the way, including the current chair for whom I work, who, you know, completely open, thoughtful with feedback. It's remarkably constructive. And that's a way of mitigating those kinds of poor decisions.
But you say how reluctant you were to taking feedback and it was forced upon you. You get to Investec, you're age 32. Bernard Cantor loves amplifying feedback. And you said it was beaten into you.
Yes, yes.
Real examples of how that might have happened.
Oh yes. Well, I'm on a family show here, so I can't share some of the actual language. But there were some moments of absolute beauty as I remember them back. I mean, they're like yesterday, where I'd be sitting in a meeting, chairing a meeting, and Bernard would come wandering in, and the next thing, a note would be passed to me during the course of the meeting, with some pretty straightforward feedback in very straightforward words about how things should or shouldn't progress. But, you know, those were, I mean, brilliant moments. They were absolutely brilliant. And I look back at them, they were all right. All that feedback was correct. But there were some magical moments of realizing that one shouldn't take oneself so importantly. But the most important feedback that I got from Bernard along the way was to keep quiet. To keep quiet. I remember him saying, "My boy, you're not a consultant anymore. You're not paid to speak. You're paid to shut up. Now keep quiet and listen." And that took me a long time because remember, at McKinsey, we were paid to advise. But upon mature reflection, I think that the best McKinsey consultants also keep quiet and listen very carefully. But it was a very, very tough lesson as to how to listen, how to observe, how to see what's going on around me, and not feel the need to speak or fill a space. I used to be very anxious about silence. Oh, I'm completely comfortable in silence. I'm happy to sit in a meeting and just look at people for very long periods of time now and try and work out what's going on in my surround and in the room. No problem at all.
And that forces other people to come forward, doesn't it? Because people
Always.
are very uncomfortable with silence, and either they will reveal something positive about themselves or will reveal something about themselves that is a red flag. It'll warn you off potentially.
Well, that's right. And the reality of the matter is that if you get comfortable in your own skin, you know what you think. You know what you think. You don't need to hear yourself say what you think. The key is to hear others say what you think and try and beat down what you've got to say or reinforce it. But if you create an environment where people in the workplace are happy to challenge, happy to probe, happy to push, that's a great workplace. Because why would I have a monopoly on knowledge? Yeah, it's like this question of mentors. I always chuckle when I hear people say, "Wow, we've got this amazing mentor," and then they'll mention somebody as somebody great and good was a mentor of mine. And I always chuckle at that because that's not the way I feel about mentors. As a chief executive, I would tell you some of the most brilliant lessons I've ever learned were from people who were very much lower in a hierarchical structure than I was. Junior entrance into the workplace. I've seen grit, perseverance, incredible performance ethic, a dedication, a passion from junior people that dwarf what I've seen from great and the good. Absolutely dwarf. From people who do extremely straightforward, thoughtful jobs every day of their lives in a workplace, could be repetitive rote jobs. These are terrific lessons.
But surely part of leadership is listening up and down and truly absorbing intelligence from those who are doing the work that you don't have time to do, doing the work they're hired to do, and bringing whatever they're learning to a table and being treated seriously in those conversations too.
I think that's right, Bruce. I mean, being a chief executive is, to my mind, the job is harnessing and convening. It's not telling, it's harnessing and convening. And being a convener of incredibly thoughtful people who are very dedicated, very passionate, have real grit, and try their best each day and bring the very, very best of themselves to the workplace is a great privilege. It's also an extremely difficult job to be a convener because you have to try and get the best out of people. I've never respected an authority figure simply because they're an authority figure, simply because they have some kind of a title. And I don't expect somebody to respect me because I'm called a chief executive or have some particular title. If I've got value to add to their lives, fantastic. If I don't have value to add to their lives, well, they should either be somewhere different or spend their time with somewhere different if they choose to stay where they are. But simply having some kind of demanding an extra measure of respect because one has a title or position or power is complete nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
In your time at Investec, you joined at age 32. The world is brewing and heading in towards a global financial crisis. You get sent off to the British government to help them unwind complex financial positions. In there, you discover you've got a penchant for the public service. You respond to an advert in the Sunday newspapers for a seat at the court of the Bank of England, the board, and you work your way to a position where you become chairman. And I think it's through both Brexit and into COVID where, I mean, maybe it's that naivety again, where you're chairing this board of the Bank of England. You're not making policy decisions on interest rates and on monetary policy at all, but you are making sure that the bank is running evenly. And you work with some amazing people there. Lord Mervyn King is there. The current Canadian Prime Minister is governor during that time as well. That is moving in circles a long way away from a kid who went to school in Claremont at Grove Primary and went to Westerford and studied accounting at UCT. Did you ever have to pinch yourself that, hold on a second, how did this happen?
Yes, I still pinch myself about how did this all happen. On the one hand, yes, I do. On the other hand, I say to myself, well, I'm really passionate about that stuff. I'm passionate about it. I'm dedicated to it. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I'm passionate about building institutions. I'm passionate about institutions, public institutions, private institutions. It really troubles me to see institutions torn down by politicians who do so. It feels like a very reckless thing to do. And we see it in country after country after country at the moment. We see institutions torn down. I'm a fan of institutions. Now, don't confuse that for one moment with a fan of bureaucracy. I'm no fan of that. I'm not a fan of bureaucracy. I'm not a fan of humdrum anything. I'm a fan of high performance driven institutions. Family offices are institutions. Banks are institutions. You run an institution. This is an institution. The Bank of England is an institution and it's hundreds of years old. And every single year brings its additional challenges. So, yes, on the one hand, I do pinch myself about that. On the other hand, I think, well, you know what? It's a strong belief in the meritocratic process and that social mobility should be at the cornerstone of everything we do. And as far as that is concerned, whether this is a immigrant South African doing that job, well, so what? The way I look is that I was really passionate about it. I studied at a business school. I was tutored by, in Stephen Kossoff, one of the finest bankers of our generation. I felt like a hand-read, pup being tutored in banking by Stephen. He taught me about how to think about a balance sheet, such that when I dealt with the Bank of England's balance sheet, which was £1 trillion balance sheet, it didn't feel in any way intimidating. It didn't feel in any way anything other than curious, challenging, thoughtful, and yet another experience. It didn't feel more than that. As to the characters I dealt with, they were wonderful, wonderful, thoughtful, real people who did interesting things beforehand and have gone on to do the most fascinating, interesting things.
You look at somebody like Mark Carney now, who's standing up against his closest neighbor and saying, we don't play by your rules, thank you very much. And if you don't want to play by our rules, we'll find other people who will. We'll find people who are going to be more predictable into the future, people who are going to want to do business with us on an even footing. And he is being central to a realignment of the world at the moment. He's quite an astonishing character.
Correct. And he is. And for those who watch Mark very closely during his time at the Bank of England, none of this should be a surprise. None of it whatsoever. And the reason it shouldn't is because if you look at the hallmarks of his behavior, and I was chairman, he was governor at that stage, so we worked intimately for some years together on some very tricky issues. But if you look at the hallmark of Mark's performance, one is absolute integrity. He said what he believed and he said it straightforwardly. Two, he was completely passionate about what he said, what he was up to, completely passionate. For him, this wasn't a job. It was a passion. Similarly, running Canada and being, at the helm of the G7 in terms of kind of very serious people, it's a passion for him. And the third is independence. This is an independently minded guy. And he took an institution, because the Bank of England is an independent institution, and you have to express yourself independently and be very, very careful of groupthink, which, by the way, is a killer of businesses, a killer of all institutions. And he railed against that and expressed himself very, very thoughtfully and clearly. So none of this is a surprise. This is a global statesman. He was that then, and he is that now. He's doing what he's always done.
It's amazing also how good people do rise in times of great difficulty, because everyone's got a breaking point beyond which they're not prepared to be pushed. And some put up their hands and say, actually, no, I'm willing to stand up and be counted at this particular point in history.
Absolutely right. I have an older brother, Malcolm Fried, also a fabulous source of counsel to me. And Malcolm always used to say, there's an Afrikaans saying, he used to say, dit is nie hoe hard, dis hoe aanhoudend. It's not how hard, it's how persistent. And when I think about that saying of Malcolm's, this question of persistence, when you look at the true greats, it's about persistence. It's about persistency. It's about consistency. It's about grit. It's about actually being able to just carry on, go forward. And the idea that things are going to go well is such an odd idea to me. I tell you, I once went to a parliamentary hearing with a colleague of mine, but the parliamentary hearing was extremely tough. We had a very difficult time, very, very difficult time. We had tetchy and difficult parliamentarians ask us impossible questions, not listen to the answers. And it was difficult. And at the end, we got in the car and we were going back to the bank. And he said to me, "Why are you smiling and why am I looking so grumpy?" So I said, look, I don't know. Let me think about that. Let me think about that question because I was smiling. I wasn't particularly bothered by what had just happened. I said, let me think about that and let me get back to you tomorrow. And the next day I got back to him and I said, well, you know what? I think the difference is you've been in the UK for X hundreds of years. Your family have been here for X hundreds of years. You've probably got a legitimate expectation that things are all going to be fine. I have exactly the opposite expectation. I don't have any such expectation. I have an expectation that things are going to be tough. And they always have been tough. I always chuckle when people think the phone rings and opportunities come my way and things happen. No, no, no. It doesn't work like that. I've never, maybe I've just had poor luck, or maybe I'm just an untalented person. Either of those two could be absolutely true. Absolutely true. But I have never had a situation that I found easy in business. Never. I've found every single breakthrough that we've made commercially, strategically or tactically or people-wise, every breakthrough has been incredibly hard. It's been hard to think through. It's been hard to deal with the consequences, both the consequences that we can see and the law of unintended consequences, which of course at this level is at play every day of our lives. It's been hard to deal with the macro effects and integrate those macro effects. And it's hard to deal with outcomes. And it's hard to deal with competitors. I mean, one thing, you're doing what you want to do, but you're not operating in a vacuum. There's a reaction function around you. So every single thing I have found hard. Nothing is easy. But I don't have an expectation that's going to be easy. Never. It's about expectation management. I find it often delightful that it's hard. Doesn't mean it's not fun. Doesn't mean it's not great. And doesn't mean I don't, thoroughly enjoy coming to work, as hard as it is. But it is hard.
From the start, the ambition was clear: to build a bank that could be more than a bank. One that rewards better decisions, connects the ecosystems that shape your life, and gets smarter the more you engage. That ambition is now a reality. With Discovery Bank, your entire financial life comes together in one intelligent platform, accessed through a single app. It understands your behavior, works harder for you over time, and helps you build your financial future with confidence. Discovery Bank, the future of banking. Now.
Take me to where you meet a man called Natie Kirsh. And I realize that you're not going to take us into the depths of a deal that you did earlier this year, in which, as chief executive of Kirsh Industries, you were at the forefront of negotiations to sell a business that Natie Kirsh started in the United States called Jetro Cash and Carry. And the figures are out in the public domain, a $29 billion deal. But take me back to meeting this great entrepreneur and the fact that you probably didn't know who he was at your first meeting.
No, I had absolutely no idea who he was. And I'll tell you, I don't even think I had told Natie the story, but you know what? Life's moved on. I'm 60, Natie's 94. I think I can probably tell the story now. When I got to Investec in 1999, I got a call from Stephen Kossoff and he said, "Hey, Brad, do me a favor, go meet this guy in London. He's a ex-South African businessman. He's living in London and he's doing business in the United States. He's building some kind of a cash and carry business there. Go and meet him and have a chat with him." So I make an appointment to see this guy. I'd never heard of him. Now, remember, I'd lived in Cape Town and I did my articles in Cape Town. And I was just focused on doing my articles and getting out. So I didn't have much bandwidth then. I just wanted to kind of do what I had to do and go to business school and start again. So I hadn't heard of this Natie Kirsh, not at all. And I went to a meeting with him in London and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kirsh, Stephen Kossoff suggested I come and meet with you." He said, "Hello, my boy, come sit down." He was a very modest guy, very modest setting. And he said, "Sit down." And he started taking me through a spreadsheet where he spoke to me about fresh fish sales. I remember thinking, Bruce, what am I doing here? I was at McKinsey in New York consulting to chief executive officers of a series of US banks and global banks. And now I'm talking about the sale of Seabass. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know why he's telling me about the sale of fresh fish. And that was my initial impression. Like, what a lovely guy, but why am I listening to this? And what is he saying to me? Anyhow, in about 20 minutes, I realized that I was in the presence of somebody who had a vision and a boldness that was utterly extraordinary. It was literally extraordinary. It took me about 20 minutes to try and ground myself. And I then listened, and I've been listening ever since. From 1999, and we're now in 2026, for 27 years, Bruce, I've been listening to a level of synthesis, insight, boldness, courage that I've never seen before, and I suspect I will never see again. I mean, I have no doubt I will never see it again. It's very rare. And I realized that 20 minutes after listening to the initial discussion about the sale of fish. And he phoned me that afternoon. He said, "My boy, thank you for coming to visit me. I've decided you'll be my banker." So I said, "Thanks, Mr. Kirsh. That's great of you. That'd be very nice. Thank you for the vote of confidence." From then on, we've had various different relationships. I've worked more closely with him. I've been his trustee, but always been part of this extraordinary man. His utterly wonderful wife and really accomplished, terrific children, all in their own rights, and they've just been great to deal with. So we've been close for 26 years, and then a couple of years ago, it became very logical. It just became clear that it would be a good step now with Natie stepping back, and 94, I suppose you're entitled, Bruce.
Possibly by 94. That's not a bad retirement age.
You're allowed to take it a little bit easy. It became a bit clear that, it was time to step up a bit more. And then I stepped into the CEO role there.
It's a different kind of CEO role. Yes, there are people who manage businesses for Natie Kirsh. There are property businesses. There are a whole host of enterprises within Kirsh Industries. And is it a very different kind of CEO role now to when you, at 32, are parachuted into a bank actively managing the day-to-day operations of a regulated business with professionals in it? Is it that different?
Very different. And, there's certain things, again, I'll go back to McKinsey days. There are certain things that I used to know theoretically, which I now know after all these many years a bit more practically. So the role then was as an operator chief executive of Investec Bank in the UK. There were 1,400 employees. All of them were doing various different things. There were front office people, there were clients, there was cash to generate, there were deals to be done, there was credit, there were investment committees, there was compliance, there was risk, there was audit, there was auditors, there were boards, blah, 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 and the list goes on. Every single day was an operational day. I'm now 60 years old, and a lot of things have happened in that period of time. And in that time, I've had different experiences and a different degree of synthesis. The job now is what I would call a strategic controller job, which is there is a portfolio, and it is a very significant portfolio, and it's a combination of operating businesses, financial assets, businesses that we're still to buy, businesses that we've just sold, things that are going on all of the time. The shareholders are very straightforward. It's not a public company. It's a very, straightforward shareholder set. And the board is very straightforward. It is extremely commercial. There's no jargon. There's no nonsense. But yet the thing that binds these two experiences is culture. Now, obviously, different cultures. But the idea that culture is so important is so interesting, because the bookend of two very different CEO models is bound up in this idea that actually being an effective chief executive is being the custodian and builder of a culture.
It's a huge responsibility because, Jetro cash and carry is just part of this empire. And it's not as simple as just selling an asset. Suddenly there is money that has to be invested and distributed, philanthropically, but money that has to be invested for future generations into new businesses, into new enterprises. And it becomes, I think, a really interesting place, particularly because Natie Kirsh at 94 is not one who's shy, I believe, in coming forward with ideas and opinions and in sharing his strongly held views, regardless of the elevated importance of his chief executive.
Look, it's not just Natie who's really kind of handed things off now much more to the next generation, but everybody comes forward. I think the point, Bruce, is that everybody is paid to come forward. In all candor, I don't want a person around me who's not going to come forward. What's the point? You want people who are going to be forthright and have ideas and be sparky and take risks. There are a few cultural tenets that are really important. Risk-taking is really important. Considered, balanced, thoughtful, proportionate risk-taking. Taking a risk, not being afraid to make an error. And when you do make that error, call the error and we'll collectively fix it. I mean, heavens, Bruce, if people couldn't make errors, trust me, I wouldn't be in situ.
I recall Stephen Kosef, I once said to him, this Investec culture of yours is really quite brutal. And he looked at me quite wounded, genuinely wounded. And he said,
wounded?
Yes, he was like, what do you mean it's brutal? We allow people to make mistakes. You just never make the same mistake twice. Because then, then we get tough.
Yeah, then it's different. Yeah, you don't want to make the same mistake twice. But as far as making mistakes is concerned, I mean, that's the apprenticeship model. If you want to build a very serious executive team, you would have a strong expectation that these people are scar tissued. And scar tissue only comes from making mistakes. Yeah, I have a very close psychologist friend in South Africa who always tells me that the greatest lesson in life is the question of resilience, how to build a resilient life. And I look at this and I think to myself, well, how do you get an executive team to build resilience? It can't only be off the back of success. It's not possible. You cannot build resilience only off the back of success. So the thought of having a team that is only successful is an almost ridiculous notion. I've never met such a person. I have never met such a person who has only known success, or a successful person that hasn't known the most problematic failures and the most difficult times. When I think about our time through the global financial crisis, that was the making of so much of me. It was the making so much of many of my colleagues. It was the making of institutions. It was the idea of being able to stand up and come back to work when actually you felt like all you wanted to do was not stand up and not go to work and never face these markets ever again. And get up and do that over and over and over and over again until such time as you ensured that your institution was safe and all was going to be fine. And at that point, you not only had to survive, but you had to thrive. So you had to capture opportunities. The lessons learned in the global financial crisis actually brought us very well into COVID, because there were a lot of similarities between the global financial crisis and COVID. The one was a financial crisis, the other one was a health crisis. But that health crisis nearly spilled into a complete collapse of our financial system. And I saw it from a public institution at that time. But the lessons that we learned from the global financial crisis were completely applicable to COVID. And many institutions emerged from COVID significantly stronger than when they went into COVID. And some didn't survive at all.
In the last 30 years or so, we've had many crises, but they sort of come along one at a time, and they space themselves very politely, generally speaking. But the last 7 or 8 years just seems to have been a calamity of crises. And I look at it just from your perspective. You kick it off with Brexit, for example, and the upheaval that caused, and into COVID, and into the inflation that built up immediately after that, into the Ukraine war, into Gaza, into Donald Trump's second iteration, his refusal to play by the rules-based order of the world, his willy-nilly signing of executive orders, his imposition of tariffs, punitive tariffs to people who wouldn't play ball with him, his language over Greenland and Venezuela, his promises to resolve Ukraine within a day, and there's still wars happening in Ukraine, his determination to win a Nobel Peace Prize, which I'm guessing is off the table now following Iran. The volume and the ferocity of crises is sending uncertainty off the charts. And how do you lead in an environment like that? Because, yes, you've experienced crises, but they're all happening at once, it feels, and there's no indication they're going to slow down.
No. So the first thing is that, well, I'll personalize it. Being deadly in a crisis is a skill. It's not a coincidence of having people that are able to deal in a crisis. You assemble people around you who can deal in a crisis, and being deadly in a crisis. And when I say deadly, I mean you hit that crisis head on, you confront the issues, you don't pretend them away, and you don't construct your own reality. The reality is the reality around one. So this whole idea of rolling crises, it hasn't really stopped, Bruce, since the global financial crisis, because even if you go back, it started in the UK almost straight afterwards with a Scottish referendum, and then pre-Brexit, Brexit, and the list has gone on and on and on. And you can see in the UK now, for example, the number of prime ministers, there's rolling political crises, all kinds of issues. And the one thing we do know about crises is that they're going to come from places where we would least expect them to come from. We don't know where they're going to come from. So I always chuckle at people are going to predict the next crisis. The one thing I would say with absolute certainty is that they are completely unpredictable. You know they're coming and you don't know where they're going to come from. So building resilient business models is one thing, but resilient business models are dependent on resilient people. And resilient people are dependent on an executive team that is deadly in a crisis, and an executive team deadly in a crisis is dependent on a chief executive who will not bend or buckle in a crisis, on the basis that a crisis is simply another day in the office. Now, I'm not belittling it. I'm saying to you, Bruce, if I look back 20 years, I had thick, wavy blonde hair. It's not the same, okay? It's black, it's gray, it's changed. This is a function of addressing rolling crises. But the reality of the matter is that having executive teams that can deal in a crisis and have experience in a crisis and not buckle in a crisis is absolutely crucial, because the idea of buckling in a crisis has a crescendo and a ripple effect that is deeply wounding and deeply penetrating in an organization.
So what does it mean then to be a CEO? We know what it takes. What does it mean?
I think it means to, in the first instance, to be very passionate about being the owner of a culture, the owning the culture and expressing oneself predominantly through a lens of culture and values that are absolutely important. That's the first thing. The second thing it means is being able to be passionate about what you want to do. You know, if you're not passionate, it's so unfair to occupy the position, because what you're doing is you're actually acting as a fire blanket to a whole organization. So you want to get rid of that chief executive as quickly as humanly possible, because it's terrible to have such a person around. You've got to be passionate about it, and you've got to be passionate about the culture, passionate about the business, passionate about what you're doing. Then you've got to care very deeply about the organization and the people around you, and you've got to sublimate your own ego for the good of that organization and of those people. You know, you'll often see chief executives who struggle to check their ego at the door. These are difficult people to work for. I've had a couple of those before, and I often think to myself, you know, how would I react to a situation? I think, what would those people do? And I shut my eyes and I think very, very deeply, and I try and do the opposite, and I'm typically always right in those situations. If you can't arrest your ego, you have to be able to arrest it. The next point is, I would say, is it needs to be a person who can really take feedback. And I'm saying to you very honestly, for my first 30 years of life, I couldn't bear the thought of feedback. That's coachable. It's coachable. If you surround yourself with thoughtful people who build you up, who are there to build you up, it's coachable. You not only have to be able to take it, but you have to be able to give it constructively, thoughtfully, helpfully, also in the service of building people up. And the final issue is, I think that there's, you know, it's my brother's issue. It's not how hard, it's how persistent. You've got to be persistent, and you've got to keep on going no matter what. And when you're tired of going, when you don't want to keep going, then you must get off the playing field. You must get off as quickly as possible, because you have to create room for people who will be persistent, who will be unhodent. They have to be unhodent. They have to be persistent. And you must get out the way for those people. And if you can't get out the way, you need a chair who's going to say to you, time to get out the way, because I'm noticing that you're not what you were. And that's the purpose of a chair. So it's not one thing. It's not one bundle of thing. And I'll tell you, a chief executive who may be good for one business may be desperately poor in another. Desperately poor in another. Because it's about connecting to the business, to the culture. There's certain cultures that I just couldn't work in certain cultures. I couldn't work in certain portfolios. I couldn't. I can't work in pharmacology. I can't pronounce the molecules. After my chemistry result in matric, I can't do that. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. You got to lean into your strengths. And after, 30, 40 years of working, if you don't really know your strengths at that stage, and if you don't know how you can synthesize at that stage, you've got a problem then. And ultimately, I think being a chief executive really, Bruce, is about synthesis, because you've got things coming at you. You've got macro stuff coming at you. You've got micro stuff coming at you. You've got performance issues, competitive issues, shareholder issues. You've got strategic issues and tactical issues. And every day it's like playing a video game, because stuff is coming at you all the time. You remember that old Pac-Man game we used to play? You used to put the money in the box and play Pac-Man and hope that you weren't eaten. Or Asteroids. Those were the games we used to play. And every day you play them yet again. And the key is to keep going, moving forward from level to level to level, while the stuff around you is resolved, addressed thoughtfully, and build a greater business with deeper roots, deeper institutional capacity, build the resilience of your people, build the skill of your people, and build the brands of your business in thoughtful ways. That's what I think is the job of being a chief executive is all about.
Be persistent. What did Churchill say? If you're going through hell, keep on going. If you're not up to the task, get out of the way and let somebody else do the job. Surround yourself with forthright people who will take risks. Considerate, balanced, thoughtful risks. Own up to mistakes. Just don't make the same mistake twice. And this is important. Listen more than you speak. You never know where real wisdom will come from unless you leave a space for it to emerge. This episode of So You Think You Want to Be a CEO is powered by Discovery Bank. Discovery Bank is an authorized FSP 48657. T's and C's apply.